Hi, I'm Jen Friedberg. I'm also a CU student and I'm a third-year student. Now, I planned an activity and I kind of guessed where people were going to sit and I didn't guess correctly. So, before we get going, what I'd like is if you guys will look underneath your seats and look and see if you have a blue Post-it note. And
they'll actually be on the floor.
Some may have fallen on the floor, some will be stuck under. And so I'd like as many people as possible to have the blue Post-it notes. We're going to play sort of a game and you're going to be
It could be stuck on the bottom of your chairs for activity.
I think I'm just going to stick around the chair.
Oh no. Mama, how did you put out?
Are there other chairs? So, I know I put them in, I think I put them in like these 3 rows. Oh no, okay, let's see.
There's quite a few I see.
Alright, okay.
Oh, you have one. Let's get your sticky notes to other people. Thanks. Here, let's get you guys some sticky notes. It's going to be for a fun prize.
There's like 16 of us. It's alright if you too. Yeah. It'll be alright. We've got an array of candy in our elegant bag here and you can take through and take a couple of pieces of candy.
Yeah.
So I'm going to talk about bankruptcy basics. And the thing about bankruptcy is it's kind of complicated and it depends a lot on individual facts. So this is only going to be an overview. If you actually are considering declaring or filing bankruptcy, you should really consider talking to an attorney, and not just any attorney, an actual bankruptcy attorney, because there are some new regulations that went into effect in 2005 that you've complicated an already complicated process, and so you really need to talk to somebody who's up on all of those changes to find out if it even makes sense or if it will actually put you in a worse position than you were before. There are a few things that you need to consider to decide if bankruptcy is even something you should be thinking about at all. Are you eligible for it? What kind of debts you have? And so these pieces of paper each have a different kind of debt listed on them. And this is the good kind of debt that we're all going to trade for candy, but some debts are not that good, and we'll talk about which ones can be taken care of in bankruptcy and which ones cannot. If all of your debt comes from a kind that you can't take care of in bankruptcy, then it wouldn't make sense to do it. And also, what is it going to mean for your future? Because you can rebuild after bankruptcy, but it takes a lot of work and it can take years. Alright, the other thing we're going to do a lot is talk about vocabulary. I just took a bankruptcy class last semester, and I have to say, it wasn't until halfway through the semester that I felt like I understood what the teacher was saying. She was a federal bankruptcy judge, and so I thought, well, if I can share this with some other folks, and so they don't have to struggle with it like I did, then that might be a good thing. It would also help you if you went and talked with your attorney. You'll be able to understand what the attorney is saying to you. So the debtor, some of them are kind of self-explanatory. The debtor, for instance, is the person who's filing for bankruptcy. Creditors are the people to whom the debtor owes money. So like credit card company, the bank that has your mortgage, anyone like that would be a creditor. Oh, and you're welcome to ask questions as we go. The trustee, this is a first word that might be a little unusual, works for the court and acts as a referee. Depending on what kind of bankruptcy you're doing, they're more or less involved. But they sort of make sure that everybody does what they say they're going to do, that the debtor follows through and that the creditors are acting properly. So, why would you want to file for bankruptcy? These are sort of the pros to filing for bankruptcy, and in a few seconds we'll talk about the cons. It stops the creditors from calling. You'll get to keep some exempt property. An exempt property goes state by state, and those are things in statutes that your state allows you to keep. So a certain value in your home, a certain value in your car, things that are tools of the trade, so like if you're a plumber, all your plumbing tools, your clothing, your personal items, stuff like that. The other good thing about bankruptcy is it gives you a fresh start. Depending on which bankruptcy you pick, if it's Chapter 7, we're going to talk more in depth in a bit about the different kinds. But Chapter 7, it's almost immediate. From the minute that you file, any income you make going forward goes to you, not to your creditors. And so there are some real bonuses that it allows you to sort of start rebuilding your life. All right, a lot of people ask, am I going to lose everything? Well, that wouldn't really work for us as a society. We don't want to have a bunch of people who declare bankruptcy and then are basically completely dependent on the community for everything. So the idea is to leave you with the basics that you need to get restarted. Again, this is a good time to talk to an attorney because they can help you with something called exemption planning, which helps you shift around your assets so that you can keep the most assets that the law will allow while complying with all of the bankruptcy rules and getting to start fresh. So what does the attorney do? A lot of people think that your attorney is going to stay with you through the entire process, but you're laughing. Have you done this before?
Yeah, actually. Your lawyer's not your VP. You don't get to like suck it on their phone.
What did your lawyer do for you?
My lawyer was awesome.
Yeah?
Yeah. Very, I mean, he's in Boulder too, so if any of you need a name, I can get it to you. Very laid back, very personal. Gave me, like, explained all of the vocabulary.
Nice.
Walked me through everything, was there the day that I needed to do everything, and I haven't talked to him since.
Yeah.
I mean, and he told me what to do to rebuild and how to take care of things. Like, not to just have a mess, you know, a wake-up mess, but to actually get through what you're about to talk about.
Great, that's really good to hear. Yeah, and I would encourage you, anyone who would be thinking about it, to shop around because the attorney works for you, not the other way around. So you need to find somebody who's going to respond to your needs and who's going to be personable and explain things. They shouldn't be treating you like you're just one of many clients and you're not important.
Or looking down on you because you're not the attorney.
Right.
This man is amazing, and his wife works with him, and they are both like, they're like they don't treat you like, oh, you got yourself into this mess and now you're like bottom of the run, you know, bottom feeder,
yeah,
or something like that. You know, we have all these terms. Right?
I think it's a common misperception that those people who declare bankruptcy are doing it because they were unwise with their finances or that they just ran up their credit card bills just because they felt like it. A lot of people, it's because they've had sort of a series of cascading tragedies. They lost a job, they got hit by bad medical bills, or they had some sort of medical problem that then they lost their job, and then they lost their health insurance, and it's usually, yeah, so it's nothing to be ashamed of if you're having to think about this.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for that. Well, you know, Walt Disney filed for bankruptcy how many times? Yeah. I mean, seriously, yeah, and a lot of famous people and people who later, I mean, needed that fresh start. And so that's a really important point. I mean, I think we all sort of think that, oh, you know, but that's definitely not the way to look at it. It's there for a reason. Bankruptcy protection is there for a reason.
And use the people as your cohort, not as somebody that's going to slap you on the hand or like, make you feel like crap. Like, find the people that are going to work with you and for you.
Well, I encourage you to share that attorney's name during the break if anybody is interested.
Well, and I'm sure a fresh start got Walt Disney thinking about, you know, happiness, right? Mickey Mouse and all those guys. All right.
Okay, so I'm not going to go in depth into the automatic stay. You can read about this if you're really interested in it in your handout there. But basically it puts pause on your situation. It's something that happens automatically with bankruptcy, but your creditors can appeal to the judge to get that stay lifted. But if they don't do that, then at least it keeps your car from being repossessed, your house from being foreclosed on, at least for a little while, so they can make a plan. Discharge is a word we're going to use a lot. That's sort of the goal of bankruptcy. And the debts that we're going to be talking about, and the game we're going to be playing is going to be focusing on which debts are dischargeable. So dischargeable debts are the ones that you can get rid of in bankruptcy, and non-dischargeable ones you can't get rid of no matter what. the estate is something that the minute you file, it gets created. It's not like an actual estate, like you could drive up and there'd be a gated drive. It's just sort of a mental construct. But it's everything you own, basically. Clothes, personal items, photo albums. It doesn't mean you lose these things, but you have to list them as part of your estate. And then that way, later, once you go through everything, the trustee will help figure out, what goes to the creditors and what you do. But it's very important to list everything no matter what, because the only way you get your discharge, your debts wiped out, is if you follow all of the rules and put everything down on the paper. There's two main kinds of consumer bankruptcy. There's some special ones for farmers and stuff like that. But we're going to focus on Chapter 7 and Chapter 13. And which plan is best for you really depends on your individual circumstances. Chapter 7 is the more traditional bankruptcy. It's known as the liquidation bankruptcy. This is where, we talked about exempt assets. That was certain value for your car, your house, stuff like that. If it's not exempt, tools of the trade, you give up everything, the trustee auctions it off, and the proceeds from that auction are divided up amongst the creditors, and it's gone forever. The good part about it is that you get your fresh start almost right away. And I say right away, and then we're talking 4 to 6 months. But that's much quicker than Chapter 13. But all this stuff, like the creditors stopping calling, all of that happens instantly. Chapter 13 is known as the wage earner's plan. So this is sort of, you're making a good income, you've got a regular income, and then bills have just gotten out of control. For whatever reason, your credit card debts are up too high, you want to be able to keep all your stuff, you want to keep your house, you want to keep your car, but you just need some help. And this is good because you get to keep your stuff, your payments go down, and you can work out a plan. The bad part is it takes 3 to 5 years to complete the plan. And you have to make all of your payments for either those 3 or 5 years based on your circumstances before you get your discharge, the debts to go away. There's some bonuses. Congress really wanted people to like this plan because it gives more money to the creditors and allows people to keep their stuff. And so they saw it as a good compromise. So because of that, there are some debts that are dischargeable in Chapter 13 that are not dischargeable in Chapter 7. And so when we play our game, you're going to see some categories up on the board, and some things will be dischargeable in both, some will go in one or the other, and some won't be dischargeable at all. And the good thing about Chapter 13 is if you really want to try, you want to keep your house, you want to keep your stuff, but then halfway through those 3 or 5 years, it's just not working out, then you can still kind of fall back on Chapter 7 as long as you're eligible. So how much are those payments that you pay for 3 to 5 years? Again, it depends. You're going to hear that a lot. So this is sort of a complicated balancing test here, and if you go to this link, you can go and look and see what your payments would be. But basically, if the debtor makes more than the median income in Colorado, you have to pay for 5 years, and if you make less than the median, you pay for 3 years. And then you can go on there and monkey around if you're serious about it and see what that would be for you. And who qualifies for Chapter 7? Chapter 7 debtors must pass what's called the means test. And this was something enacted by Congress to try and weed out people who Congress thought ought to be able to pay off their debts without declaring bankruptcy. Generally, if the debtor's monthly household income is less than the Colorado median income for a household of the debtor's size, she is presumed automatically to be eligible to file for Chapter 7. And each state uses its own cost of living, and that is come up with by the IRS, I believe. So you can get some ideas. If you're thinking about it, you can go onto this means test website and plug in your numbers and see if you qualify. All right, here's another important vocabulary: secured debt. This is basically any time that you have a debt that is secured by an item, that if you didn't pay it, the creditor could come and get something. So like a mortgage is a secured debt because they could come and get your house. Or if you have your car loan, it's probably secured against your car. Unsecured debt is where they can't come and get some specific thing. And so this is like credit card debt is the big one that you always talk about. Some bank loans and some payday loans. And we're going to have somebody in a bit talking more extensively about payday loans and how those work.
Medical falls on that.
Medical is unsecured debt. Yeah, medical is one of the #1 items that can be discharged in bankruptcy under either plan. So for Chapter 13, the people who qualify are individuals, not companies, with regular income, and you can't owe more than $360,000 and $360,745 in unsecured. So that's credit card debt or medical bills. And you can't owe more than $1 million and whatever in secured debt. So that's your house, your car, debts like that. So what is Chapter 13 better than Chapter 7? You want to be able to, basically when you want to keep your stuff. When you want to keep your house, but you want a chance to catch up on your mortgage or your car loans. And you really, really want to repay your debts. Maybe you have a personal relationship with some of the people you owe money to, and it's important to you to take care of that for relationship reasons. If you've got non-exempt property that you want to keep, you don't want to let it go to auction. Or if you have a co-debtor on a personal debt. So say somebody co-signed for you on a loan, and then you go into bankruptcy, the creditors go after the person that co-signed in Chapter 7. But in Chapter 13, you protect that person by taking care of it. And we talked about this before, so I'll just go over it briefly, but if you start to miss your Chapter 13 payments, that's not working out, then you can often renegotiate your plan with creditors. If you qualify for Chapter 7, you can fall back on that. And judges will often let debtors try to make their Chapter 13 payments, and if they can't make the ends meet, they can still fall back on Chapter 7. Yeah.
Basically start the clock.
They start the clock.
On the, because there's time periods.
Oh, right. So,
Time frames.
yeah, say you're like halfway through your payments, then you kind of start from scratch on Chapter 7. All right, so certain debts are non-dischargeable. These are the ones that would be bad to have if you were thinking you were going to take care of them with bankruptcy. Child support. That's kind of obvious why as a society we don't want people to be able to get out of that. Luxury goods worth more than $500 bought within 90 days of bankruptcy. So sometimes you see this where we've read a bunch of these cases where, you know, people know the bankruptcy's coming and they think they're going to be able to get out of all their credit card debt, and they're like, you know, or I know what I'm going to do. So you got these wild shopping sprees, but then you have to stand there in front of the judge and explain how you did that.
He calls you a fool.
Right, yeah. And so
a lot of that.
it happens. It would be tempting. School loans for all of us law students, that's something that we would like to be able to get rid of. You pretty much cannot get rid of your school loans. I think if you could show extreme hardship, it would have to be something really dramatic, like you were halfway through school, you'd taken out all these loans, and then you fell off a ladder and hit your head, and now you have a closed head injury, and you're, you know, not going to be able to work for the rest of your life. Something like that is what it would take to get out of your school loans. And debts that the debtor didn't list when filing initially. So this is what we talked about before when you're declaring what your estate is and you're filling out your form and you list everything you own. You also have to list every debt you have. Anything that you don't list on there, it's considered fraud, and the judge says, or the trustee says, no way, it doesn't get discharged. All right, we're running out of time here. We're gonna jump to our game, and as we're playing this game, I'm gonna kind of explain what the items are as we're going through them. So we're going to be talking about what's dischargeable and what's non-dischargeable. And again, all these slides are in your packet. So if you're interested in going through this by yourself later, you can check out the details. So if you have a Post-it and you want to be the first victim, trade your Post-it for candy. All right, come on down. So read out your debt, and we'll see if we can guess. You can just shout it out, whether you think it's dischargeable or non-dischargeable.
Child support.
No. Excellent. All right, so if you will, put it up on the...
Watch the wires on the ground.
Where's the Snickers? Again, you can take it. Okay, what do you have? Yeah.
Are purchases of luxury goods or services for 500 or more maintenance?
We already talked about that one. Non-dischargeable. Never. Okay, so you can go ahead and stick it up there. And who's got another one?
I got fees associated with crimes against persons.
Ooh, crimes against persons. Can't get out of those ever. Okay.
Mine is fees associated with crimes against property.
Ooh, any guesses?
I would say yes.
Yes, under Chapter 13 only, but very close.
Yep, good job.
So good job.
Medical bills.
Does anybody remember?
Discharge.
Always dischargeable, yes. So stick it on the line between 7 and 13.
One of the most popular reasons for filing.
Yeah. Okay, what do you got?
Charges with DUIs, and I say non.
That's right, non-dischargeable.
Right, but that's perfect, right? No, too.
Never. Can't get rid of those.
Thank you so much for your comments earlier.
What do you have?
I got credit card.
Ah, anybody remember?
Yes.
Always dischargeable, so put it on the line.
Except in the last 90 days.
That's right, the luxury goods one.
Yeah,
So
except
luxury
right.
goods.
Government fines like traffic tickets.
Correct. That one is non-dischargeable. This is a weird one. Homeowner association fees. Guesses? Non-dischargeable. You cannot get out of that.
You were good reason for it because it affects the whole community that you're in. And so the idea is it's not just to protect. You pay those fees for the whole association. So that's why.
I suspect they also have really good lobbyists.
Actually, that's even better reason. It's usually really politics, but I was trying to find.
Yes, your idea sounds
I didn't hear that. What was it? What was it?
So debts incurred under false pretenses or deceit.
Yeah, so that would be if you lied to your bank and made them think that you were a good credit risk and you weren't.
Ouch.
Yeah. Non-dischargeable.
Liar.
Lying. Non-dischargeable. Okay.
Unlisted debts.
No.
That's right. Fraud. Yep. Car payment. Any guesses?
If it's under a certain amount though,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So what is that?
So dischargeable under 7. If it's under 13, then you're going to keep it in order to keep your car. So put us under 7, please. Good work.
Debts coming out of property settlements in divorce or separation proceedings.
That's right. 13 only. Very nice. Mortgage payment. Any guesses? 7 only. Correct.
Can you do that one again? Yes, I understand. The divorce one?
So if it's a property settlement, not a maintenance payment or a child support payment, then under Chapter 13, you can get out of it.
What if it's credit card debt settlement?
You might be able to get out of that under Chapter 13, hypothetically.
No, 7.
Oh, just not as part of a divorce?
So in court, they say it's assigned to you. Then you file 7.
I'm not sure. Why don't we
What
talk
has
about...
already been entered as a judgment as your credit card debt?
Pardon?
Oh, if it's a judgment against you already, then you can't get out of it, is my understanding. But I'm not a bankruptcy attorney. So you should probably talk to an attorney specifically about that. If you want, we could chat about it and clarify during break.
Yeah, and it gets complicated. And this is why value added, actually, this is an area where, and Jen did a good job of it, I mean, it is an area where you really should consult an attorney when you're filing, because you can take all the courses until you're blue in the face and have passed the bar exam, but unless you actually are a bankruptcy attorney and do this as your job and really know the ins and outs, because you also, there's so many laws that you have to constantly keep abreast of that are changing, things along the lines where I would really encourage anybody who's ever actually going to file for bankruptcy to most certainly consult with an attorney. It's usually fairly reasonable.
Yeah, I was going to say, the attorney's fees weren't that much.
No, I did an attorney that paid very low, but this is confusing because it didn't come up that way, so.
Well, and it might not have because of the way, and right away in my brain, I'm going, there's so many different questions you would have to go through because you have to look at exactly the timing, when was what time, but there's a lot of different questions on it.
And there's even the IRS. There's some IRS dischargeables that are very, very tricky.
Like whether or not it's 3 years.
3 years from a certain calendar date or that year before.
It's one of those things where the only way to, so I definitely, it's one of those where you want to consult an attorney.
That was going to be my question, was what if we owe the IRS a bunch of money?
Yeah, certain income taxes can be discharged under 13, but generally not. It depends on the timing.
Okay.
Do you happen to know, just randomly, if you're going through a divorce where the primary wage earner hasn't paid taxes for like 4 years, and you don't have any wage earning, is it better to, like, hypothetically to say go through the whole divorce process and then file for bankruptcy as opposed to filing prior to the divorce proceedings?
I'm afraid that's above my pay grade. Which
That's what I think too.
But then actually, I mean, as a victim with IRS, if your spouse didn't pay the taxes, there's a victim resolution in there where there's a victim area for the IRS.
Okay, thank you.
And this is another thing where you would definitely, this is another thing where you would definitely want to talk to an attorney on it. And we can talk more at the break because there's more to it as well when you think about sort of structuring that and what a trustee can do for you and how you can work things out.
I am meeting with legal aid this coming week, so
and this is another one where I feel your pain. So
and I feel the identity theft pain also. Just
they always come together sometimes.
Do I have a question in the back?
This one's a general question about attorneys. What is the difference between a $900 bankruptcy attorney and a $1,500 bankruptcy attorney?
You know, it all depends. I would meet with them and chat with them, and I would pick the person that I felt was communicating better with me because, I mean, the price could range. I feel like either of those prices is probably fair, and I would just go with the person that I felt comfortable with because spending a little bit more on a good attorney who's going to listen to you and you're going to have experience more like we talked about earlier, I think that would be worth it.
They should have free consultations.
Yeah. And definitely they should have free consultations. And it's like picking an attorney is like picking a good pair of shoes that fit right for you. I mean, that's really true. And even in like working for different law firms throughout, people hire individuals, not the firm. And so it's not necessarily a brand name thing or anything like that. It's really feeling comfortable with that particular individual. And doing your due diligence, like was suggested earlier, to look into the licensing authorities, make sure that look at DORA, ask DORA is super helpful, thank you. I would absolutely check that before I ever hired somebody. And that's true for doctors for a lot of things. You can look on DORA. It's a great resource.
And I also just wanted to add too, and someone mentioned it, that they're seeing legal aid. There are free services in Boulder County through Boulder County Legal Services, and they can assist you with bankruptcy. So if you're income eligible, and they can talk to you about that. And do you need their number? I know it, unfortunately. 303-449-7575.
And what is, and that's the legal
Boulder
aid?
County Legal Services Division of Colorado Legal Services.
I just want to add one other thing because check with the Colorado, the state.
Really crappy, really crappy. Like I have a lot of medical debts and stuff before we even got married. So with us getting married, if I wanted to file bankruptcy, because his credit's pretty good, but mine is really bad, could I file like individually, or would we have to file?
You can file individually.
And that's not going to affect him?
I'm not sure about that.
Well,
That would work out.
generally it's premarital debt.
It is.
Yeah, so when you marry someone, you marry their dad.
That's true.
What was
I
that?
happen to know that answer.
Oh, you do? Okay.
It only affects the joint accounts.
Oh,
We don't have any.
Joint accounts, then, but otherwise you can file separately.
He's smart, we don't have any.
I just have a couple more slides, and it's basically just what are the, because I know we're out, but just really quick, the consequences that you might want to think about is that it can take years to rebuild your debt. So this is sort of a last resort thing. You want to think long and hard about it. We've already told you a gazillion times, talk to an attorney first, and just know that it'll be all right. There are ways to get credit afterwards, but it's more expensive, and it could take, I don't know, years to be able to get back to a decent interest rate.
I'm going to jump in here. So we meet with people individually regarding credit and rebuilding credit. We also have credit classes. So we will talk to you for 2 hours long. I will talk to you for 2 hours long about rebuilding credit. And there's some very focused, thoughtful things that you can do to repair your credit, and it doesn't necessarily have to take that long.
Excellent. Okay, then I'm going to turn the floor over to the, oh yeah?
Just a quick question, when does the 10 years or whatever that it's on your record, does it start from when you file, or does it start from when it's discharged?
The overwhelming answer is discharged. Is what we're hearing. And there's also limits that you can't file again within a certain amount of time. I believe it's 6 years. So, and I've got some links there that might help you out. And it's all in your materials. Yep. John is going to take it from you all as well, and I will be giving a presentation today on the basics of the CARD Act.
And I should, by the way, 2L means the second year law school. After a while, I was like, wait a minute, I should probably say, what does that mean, right?
Well, how many of you all have a credit card or have had a credit card in the past? That's pretty much all of us, for the most part, and that's pretty common. About 35% of people between the ages of 18 and 35 have a credit card, and 65% of people in the U.S. between the ages of 35 and 55 have a credit card. So that's a lot of people, is what it comes down to. And the credit card was put in place to protect consumers, so everyday people like me and you, from excessive penalty fees and from credit card companies that were kind of trying to take advantage of consumers. When you signed those big, long credit card agreements that you got, we've already talked a lot about how they like to hide provisions in there. And the CARD Act just is out there to ensure that consumers are on a level playing field. So, have any of you noticed that your credit card statements in the past few years have been a little bit easier to read? Yes, you're nodding your head. Well, they should look more like, they should include information like this. They should include late payment warnings, how long it's going to take you to pay off your balance, if you're making only your minimum payment. For instance, I was really surprised when I looked at this. This person has a balance of $3,000 and her minimum payment is only $90 a month. Well, if you look down at the bottom of the screen, if she makes only her minimum payment every month and doesn't put anything else on her balance, so she's not charging anything else on her credit card, it's going to take her 11 years and it's going to cost $4,745. Now, that's $1,745 more than what she owed on her original balance. Now, I can think of a lot of things that I would like to do with that kind of money. I could, go on a fun trip or buy a new dress, go out to eat, all of the above, pay some other bills. Well, if you notice that if she pays only $13 more a month, so that's $10 more than her minimum payment, it's only going to take her 3 years to pay it off, and she's going to save $1,033. So I personally would like to have that information when I'm deciding how much I want to pay every month. So, to understand the CARD Act, I'm going to talk about it in terms of 5 big questions. Those are what, when, who, why, and how. So first off, what? What is the CARD Act? What does it actually do? Well, the CARD Act stands for the Credit Card Accountability, Responsibility, and Disclosure Act. That's really just a big long name. If you want to find out any information on it, you can pretty much just Google the CARD Act. It's easier to remember, and you'll find out all of this information. And as I talked about, it's new rules aimed to protect consumers from credit card issuers' predatory practices. So when? Did any of you all know that in 2009 there was a new law put into place? You did. You're very informed. I had no idea. I noticed that my statements looked a little bit easier to read, but I had no idea that there was this new law that was supposed to protect me. So in May 2009, President Obama signed this law into effect, and most of its provisions took effect in 2010. So they're all in place now, and just keep in mind that it's a relatively new law. So there's still discussions going on and ways to modify it. It's not perfect. There's still a lot of areas where credit card issuers are able to exploit consumers. So they're still trying to work out some of those kinks. Who is in charge of administering the CARD Act? Well, my colleague Hunter talked about this morning the CFPB, the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, and we'll be having a presentation in a little bit from another of my colleagues on some of the basics. But you kind of just want to know who's in charge in case you have a problem with your credit card company. It's always best to talk to your credit card company first. They're able to resolve a lot of the problems without you having to file a complaint and involve a government agency.
And this is great, and thank you for right away. I just want to again point out this website, and we're going to talk about it more this afternoon. But when you are looking at, I know it drives me batty, right? You go into, and if you Google CARD Act or whatever it might be, and you might pull up a lot of bad companies, and it might get hijacked through, I mean, like, seriously, if you pay a fee to Google, then, you know, companies are, I mean, there's different things that can come up. This website is really user-friendly and legitimate. And when you see .gov, by the way, that's a good sign, right? And this is probably one of the best ones that the federal government has for just providing basic information about the CARD Act, about their great frequently asked questions areas and things like that, and sort of how-tos and know your rights and things to look for and ways to file complaints, and even on product safety and everything else. And I just really want to highlight that website again. I think it's probably one of the better ones around and easy to use.
Also, I talked a little bit earlier about how those credit card agreements are really hard to understand, and they use a whole language in and of themselves. At least I think it's a whole different language than what I speak. But they actually have a glossary on the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau's website, and it's really easy, and they just have some key terms broken down, easy to understand language. It's not like one of those glossaries where you're going to have to go and look up every other word that they use in their definition, which I think it's not very helpful for me. But we talked about the complaint process. If you can't resolve the issue with your credit card company and they're just being really unhelpful, you can file a complaint on the CFPB's website. And as you'll see at the top, it's a pretty easy to use. They have a search engine, but you can also click on submit a complaint, and it'll bring you to the screen. And you can click on credit card, which is over on the left here, and it will bring you to the screen. You pretty much just describe what happened to you, what remedy you're seeking, your contact information, and
one thing that's kind of cool, if you mind going back to that last screen really quickly, you can actually complain about the complaint process.
Yeah.
And they're looking for that sort of feedback to keep improving the complaint process. But that's just, they're really trying to sort of beef out the complaint process itself, so tell your story, that link there. You can actually complain about the complaint process.
Yeah, it's really helpful. I was actually really surprised. A lot of these websites, I feel like their search engines are really bad. They bring you to every press release ever given from an agency, and they, like, the first few links are all like, what do you need to know? What are the laws? Like, broken down so you can understand them. It's not going to bring you to the statute where you're going to have to finagle your way through. So why do we have the CARD Act? I already talked about this a little bit when I showed you the credit card statement. It's pretty much just to put you on an even playing field with the credit card companies. President Obama said fairness and transparency. They want you to know what you're getting into, and they want you to be able to react to that information and not be taken advantage of. So how does this actually work? How does it accomplish those goals? I'm going to talk about 6 main ways today. 1 through interest rate, fees, billing and payment changes, and increased clarity, gift cards, and an ability to pay provision. So first off, interest rates. So bear with me, I know they're complex and they're not very interesting, but they're really important, especially if you're choosing a new credit card, to understand what the new laws are. And so first off, your credit card company can't increase your interest rate for the first 12 months, but there are lots of exceptions to a lot of these rules. For instance, if your interest rate is tied to an index and that index increases, your interest rate can increase. If you have an introductory rate, after the first 6 months, it can revert back to the go-to rate. Also, if you're more than 60 days late in paying a bill, they can raise your interest rate, or if you're in some sort of workout agreement. Also now, under the Card Act, anytime your credit card company wants to increase your APR, they have to explain why they're doing it. And anytime they increase it, they have to reevaluate that increase every 6 months to determine if it's appropriate. They also cannot increase your rates on a current balance unless you miss 2 consecutive payments. So that means that if they do decide to change your interest rate, anything that's already on your balance is still covered under that old interest rate. It's not you're not going to have this new higher interest rate applied to those purchases. Now, this is especially valuable because they have to tell you 45 days in advance anytime they want to increase your interest rate. So that gives you the option of canceling your card, deciding to switch to another one if you would like to pursue that. So fees, they can no longer charge you excessive penalty fees. So essentially what reasonable means is they can't charge you more than $25 if they're going to impose a penalty fee on you. Again, there are some exceptions if one of your last 6 payments was late or if it's justified based on the cost that your credit card company would otherwise incur. Also, no inactivity fees. When I first got my credit card when I was 18 and going to college, this wasn't in place, and I was really surprised that I went to my bank and got my first credit card there, and they told me that it was better to spend money every month in order to save money so that I didn't get these inactivity fees. I don't know, it really surprised me that that was the case, but no longer you can't be charged inactivity fees for not using your credit card. Also, there's a 1 fee limit, so essentially means they can't charge you 2 fees if you violate your credit card agreement in some way, such as by
over limit and late fee.
Yeah. And also, over limit fees. I don't know if a lot of you have noticed that most over limit fees have actually gone away for the most part. They're not specifically banned by the Card Act, but now you have to specifically opt in to be able to go over your credit limit. And so a lot of credit card companies have just done away with that in general.
So they can't charge you a late fee, which puts you over limit, and then charge you an over limit fee. It's just greed.
Unless you opt in to allow for it. Unless you opt in.
I don't even have one.
But when she limit is over next time, what is that duration?
That's per statement.
But also, it's like with respect to that act, the violation. Like, let's say you violated it in a couple of different ways, or you have a couple of different, then you can be charged those different fees for different things. It's just the same exact thing. You can't say, oh, we're going to charge you 2 fees for that exact action. You don't make sense. Correct. And you guys should, and one thing to notice is sort of, gee, how is it possible no activity fees, but then prepaid cards, because those prepaid cards are under the Card Act. So that's explaining, sort of putting 2 and 2 together if you're kind of wondering, wait a minute, well, we have different rules here.
And also, because over limit fees aren't banned, I wouldn't recommend opting in to the over limit fee at all. I mean, it might mean that your credit card gets denied, but overall,
That's
It's
better.
really not that bad. Like, it's so much better for your financial health to just not opt in, your credit card gets denied, and you're like, oh, I must be over my limit, and you go back home and you replan it.
A little embarrassment at the cashier is better than a little
Yeah. Billing and payment changes. I don't know if any of you all remember that your credit card company used to be able to send out your statement and have payment required within 14 days. And that's a pretty quick turnaround. Now, under the Card Act, it's 21 days. So it's a little bit longer. They have to send you your statement, and your statement has to, your balance, or your minimum payment on your balance is due at the same time every month. So they can't change that around, and that just helps, like, you plan your budget, and then you know your credit card statement is going to be due and come out.
Does that mean that you can't, like, plan on paying your credit card bill on the first of the month every month because you only have 21 days? You have to pay it within a few days of getting the bill?
No.
No,
You don't have 21 days.
it's, what they mean is they've got to give you notice in advance of changing your due date. 21 days in advance of that. Which
Okay.
they were you. Well, because see, what used to happen what they're trying to stop is this. They would change, like, let's say your due date was always the 2nd of the month. And then you set up your online payments, or you set up things so that you always just expected that you were going to pay your bill by that time. Well, companies, what had happened and why they actually wanted a new rule where you get notice in advance of any time change is that they were, like, changing that, so you were being charged these late fees, and you thought, well, gosh, how did that happen? It's because they'd actually changed the due date. So now you need to know that in advance. So if you go in and you make sure that you're paying things on time and that you have not had things set up such that you'll always be paying on that other date. So it's about notice of any change, so that you know to change your payment schedule. Does that help?
All right, and then payments are directed to your highest interest balance first. That's actually really helpful because in the past they would direct it towards your lowest interest, obviously, and then you would just end up owing more and more because you still have these high interest charges on your account. And there is an exception if you're in a deferred interest plan, payment plan, but as a general rule, they have to direct it towards your highest interest balance first. Also, new to cycle billing, essentially they can't, a credit card company can't impose interest charges on a balance in the current statement. So again, it's just saying that they can't bill you twice, essentially. Clarity.
It sounds crazy, but they were, where they would basically be charging you interest on the same balance twice. Yeah, but we didn't really notice it as consumers, and so now that's not allowed.
Clarity, your statements, we've already discussed this a little bit. They're just a little easier to read in general. They have late payment warnings, minimum payment warnings. Also, just an interesting statistic, the CFPB did a study and they found that 60% of people said their credit card bills are now easier to read after the Card Act, even if they didn't know that the Card Act had taken place. So, and gift cards. So the gift cards that I'm going to talk about, they aren't prepaid cards. And my colleague John spoke a little bit about the difference earlier. And just to reiterate, prepaid cards aren't covered by the Card Act, so that's how they get away with charging you those high fees and just all sorts of bad things. But it does cover store gift cards. Now these would be like a gift card you buy for like a friend for their birthday to go shopping at the Gap. Now, if you go shopping, I know around the holidays, I often saw, deals, or I got emailed, if you spend $100, you get a $25 gift card. Those $25 that they're giving you, the Card Act considers free money, and these rules that we're going to be talking about don't cover those. So just to keep in mind, it does cover gift cards with the Discover, Visa, MasterCard, or American Express logo. New rules, there's limits on expiration dates. So if you purchase a gift card, it can't expire within 5 years of its purchase, the money on it. Also, if you put more money on a gift card, that has to have a 5-year expiration date as well.
And the thing because this gets real confusing on gift cards with Discover, Visa, MasterCard, or American Express, because it just seems like, well, isn't that the same as a prepaid? No, because the prepaid cards we were talking about earlier, those are reloadable. Gift cards aren't. Gift card, it is what it is. You give it away, it's a gift, and once it's gone, and it is a gift card.
Yeah. Also, replacement cards. If your gift card does have a balance on it and it's going to expire, you can usually call the gift card issuer and they will issue a new gift card for no charge most of the time. Also, they're required to disclose any fees. I don't know about any of you, when I was probably 12 years old, my grandma really liked to send American Express gift cards. And she sent me one. I took it to Best Buy after I, saved some extra money to buy whatever it was, a boombox or something really cool. And I got there and I got to the register and I found out that I had pretty much no money on my gift card that said it was worth $20. Well, it turned out that I had all of these fees for not using it and I had no more money. So no boombox. But now gift cards are required on their packaging or on the gift card itself to disclose any fees that you're going to be subject to. Also, there are limits on fees, so they can impose a fee if you don't use it after a month, which it's not as great as we would maybe like, but it does help a little bit, so you have that extra time.
In general, I mean, that's a great point. So really, what we always say is if you do get a gift card or something like that, spend it right away. Use it or lose it. I mean, it is a good idea to do that also because you might have heard in the news, like when Sharper Image went under, is that, if the company goes bankrupt, that's a huge bummer to hold a gift card to a bankrupt company. So, it just makes good sense to go ahead and use it.
Also, so this is the last point on how it works, so we're almost to the end. But ability to pay. I don't know if any of you are stay-at-home moms or stay-at-home dads, but if you maybe noticed that it's harder to get a credit card than it used to be. And that's because you used to be able to use your household income to calculate whether you were eligible for a credit card, and now it's all based off of individual income. So if you are a stay-at-home parent, you can't necessarily get a credit card anymore because you don't necessarily have that individual income to rely on.
Unless you have a co-signer with your spouse or whatever it is, but it is something to be aware of.
Correct, and that also applies to those under the age of 21. So for those of you with kids, this was in reaction to the fact that a lot of credit card companies were going out there and preying on college students who you'd get to college your first day and almost pretty much like at the admissions fair they would say, sign up for a credit card and get this free shirt. Well, now because there is this ability to pay provision. If you're under the age of 21, you're required to have a co-signer or show that you have the individual ability to pay. Caution. So there are lots of areas that the Card Act doesn't cover. And still some problems. One of them we've already spoken a little bit about, the ability to pay provision, and if you don't have an individual income, how much harder it can be to get a credit card. Your issuer can still change your interest rate in response to delinquent payments, which we spoke about a little bit as well. Also, a lot of credit card companies have increased the amount that your minimum payment that's actually due. And this is in response to the fact that they can't really charge these excessive penalty fees anymore. So credit card companies have tried to wiggle around the rules a little bit. There's also still some confusion surrounding credit card statements, particularly with the age of electronic communications and the fact that most people get their credit card statements online. They can be a little bit confusing to understand. The Card Act does not cover credit cards used primarily for a business or commercial purpose. It's for everyday consumers like me and you, and not for big businesses. And product comparisons. If you're out there and you're choosing a credit card, there are so many available that it's overwhelming. And the CFPB is working on a means for comparing the products out there and figuring out what's right for you. But due to the nature of credit cards and people's individual spending habits, it's really, really hard to compare products. So it's not out there yet. There's not really a good means of telling you which one's the best credit card. But if you know your own spending habits and you look at these credit card agreements and look at their interest rates, that's a pretty good base for calculating. Also, I've included some resources. The CFPB's website, if you're interested in credit cards at all and what the rules are, it's really user-friendly. Federal Reserve also has a pretty user-friendly website. And you can check out our blogs and fact sheets on myconsumertips.info. There's some stuff up there on gift cards. I also recently lost my wallet, so if any of you all have ever gone through that experience.
How fun it was.
It's a load of fun. But yeah, any questions?
Is there a appointed director now of the CFPB? The Republicans are blocking them.
Richard Cordray, yeah, he is the appointed director. That's a whole legal morass and that he's being challenged because were those intercession appointments. But between us, as far as like from what I know, like from my friends and different things like that, I don't think it's going to go anywhere. I mean, right now we really only have one federal court that even held that about the NLRB, the National Labor Relations Board Director. And it's probably not going to have a whole lot of repercussions to you and me, most likely. Because right now, he's still the director. Richard Cordray is in place, and things are on their way and going right now. So, but that's an interesting issue, a fun question to ask. Yes, okay.
One of the suggestions we make at our office is for people to go through their wallets and take out every single card, lay it on the top of a copy machine, copy it, flip them over and copy the back sides. Because if your wallet or purse is ever stolen, you get all the information, all the phone numbers, all the account numbers, all the contact information right there somewhere stored at home. So it'd make it easier to contact all those card holders.
And there are a couple of credit card tips in general, just to add. First of all, like on the myconsumertips.info, a lot of the consumer tips have to do with this. There are different, pretty legitimate ways to do comparisons on credit cards. You know, are you the type of person that's going to carry a balance or not? Do you want certain rewards? Do you want travel rewards? Do you want to avoid annual fees? These are all things to look at. Moreover, they can talk about this with building credit. You know, if you have a long history with a credit card company, that's going to help you build credit, not canceling that card. Being careful not to apply for too many credit cards because that impacts your score. Being careful in all of those different things makes sense. Also, if you do belong to a bank or credit union, you should really find out what different cards they offer. And that can oftentimes be your best bet because if you have an account there, then you probably can get a credit card without any fees and things like that. And there are a lot of ways then you have an accountable individual there. And if you do ever get your purse stolen or whatever happens, it's nice because then you have someone to deal with. And you can even, I know when my purse was stolen recently and the credit cards were all gone, because I work directly with people at the credit union, I was able to get new credit cards within like an hour. Have all of mine canceled, get brand new plastic, and be off and go to the store and have new fraud alerts put onto my credit card. So that, for example, and this is smart for anybody to put fraud alerts. Like if you find out, then they will tell you and block things from like a foreign location and places that you would never go to or really large amounts. You can set up a fraud alert so that you will be alerted right away if some huge payment or somebody buys something really expensive, you know, on your credit card. So these are different ways that you can actually use credit cards to your advantage and actually sort of benefit in the long run, and different ways you can get rewards and things along those lines. So it's, again, it's not all bad. There are ways that you can really use credit cards to your advantage. And nowadays, in order to rent a car, in order to take a flight, there are a lot of things where you kind of have to have a credit card, you know. And so it's something to, you know, it's got its cons, but it also has its pros.
And if your credit card is stolen, it's great advice to keep copies. I do at home. I did while I was traveling in the airport, actually. So I was luckily past security, but it was stolen while I was in the airport and actually in DIA. And you can usually call your credit card company as soon as you realize it's stolen, though. You should call because that just helps catch them. It limits your liability. You're only liable usually for up to $50 on your credit card. There are different rules for debit cards. But your credit card company will work with you if you don't have your number with you. For instance, I don't know my number. I was I know the last 4 digits. But they're really good about working with you usually.
And we're going to talk more about with the identity theft later this afternoon with our last group of presenters, because there are so many things like that of having track of things and where you can be preventative now and have this in a drawer and give to your, you know, whatever, but knowing these things, because it actually is kind of, you know, I'm a law professor and here I think, oh, I'm being so careful and da 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 da, and I should have kept track of this and that, and I really shouldn't have carried my licenses to practice law in my purse. Like there are things that I had in my purse that I probably shouldn't have had there. So then when I had a theft happen to me, and I learned a lot of things along the way, health cards, your health insurance, everything else. And Ariel's going to talk to us more about that this afternoon. But it makes you think about, it doesn't take that long, but boy oh boy, can you protect yourself now by having that information on the ready. Okay, thank you. You did it.
Yeah.